Okay.
And I stayed there till 7:40 in the morning.
Right.
And I got my night view on it, and I could see right through it. The light was coming in right out there.
Keep it in the camera. Yeah. Show me where the light's coming out from.
Coming right out of the corners.
Right, okay.
3 corners. That's right.
Fascinating.
Okay. And how many people have seen that?
Yeah.
How many people have seen that? Okay. Right. So this was here in Brink Hill. I went round a few of the villages just asking people various things, and I found another witness, Morag Taylor, who was a taxi driver. She was driving along this road heading north in the early hours of the A16 near the same area, Brink Hill. So just listen to this description. Can you tell me what you have seen in your time as a taxi driver late at night in this region?
There's only the one incident really. I was driving home from Skegness towards Louth one night, about 3 in the morning, and there was a thing hovering in the sky with lights, and the lights were too big to be stars, so I sort of was keeping an eye on it. And then it just shot away at a speed that I thought was much faster than the Harrier jump jet type things.
Right.
And since then it's been explained away to me as being a covert military
Stealth aircraft.
Yeah. And I just accepted that as
You've accepted
as fact.
that. So can I ask, you read that in the newspaper, or where did you get that from, that explanation?
I've got various friends who are quite into aircraft.
Right.
And when I mentioned the incident, they said, oh, that would be whatever it was.
Okay. So
They test quite a lot out of Coningsby.
right. So a test aircraft flown from Coningsby.
It was quite low. It was probably like 3 stories.
Okay. And what sort of size?
Quite big. Probably about the size of a articulated lorry.
Right. What about colour and luminosity?
It was very dark. There was no luminosity, but it was lit at both sides.
Right.
And it had legs.
Right. It had legs.
It had legs. It was outlined in the sky, and it had legs, and there were
Right.
lights on just above the legs.
I see. And what sort of shape would you describe it as?
Triangular.
All right. So it was a large flying
Big
triangle, basically.
with legs.
Right. Okay. And then, but it was stationary.
It was hovering.
Hovering, and then.
Silent. There was no noise.
So there was no noise.
No, and then it just went.
Now, she's been told by a friend that it was a military test aircraft. Now, but if you listen to her testimony, it sounds to me like she's describing the same thing that Eric Goring was describing. It's silent, triangular. She says the size of an articulated lorry. He said 30 feet each side. It's about the same. The fact that it suddenly disappears, it sounds like it's the same thing. Now, maybe they have got completely silent craft that can disappear in a blink of an eye, the military, but why would they be testing them there? I'm not sure. I'm just presenting the evidence. Okay, now another witness contacted me from Lincolnshire. This time this sighting was in broad daylight, a very different sighting to the previous 2, but it happened quite close by. I interviewed this guy by telephone.
Range Road from Alford to Mablethorpe, and it was actually on Staleby Crossroads.
Alford to Mablethorpe Road, okay.
Yes. And I come up to it, and it's pretty blind because there's trees either side.
And were you heading towards Mablethorpe or back?
Yes, I'm heading towards Mablethorpe.
Okay, so you're about two miles out of Alford, heading towards Mablethorpe.
So I do that trip every single day.
Yeah.
And I do the school runs twice a day when my wife's not here. And the sunroof was there and everything. It's got a sunroof. I remember that really, really vividly. And I came round the corner, and my little girl was in the back, and she screamed. And the car in front of us stopped, and there was this grey egg-shaped thing, like a kin, because I can say, and it was, say the road's 20 feet across, because it's a normal size A road. I would say it was 3 times longer, wider than the road. What came to mind was a huge, I thought it was like a Westland Wessex helicopter. That's what came into my mind, because they're like big bulbous thing. It was stopped right above the road, and it was absolutely huge. Like it was bigger than a plane, massive. And it was just moving forward about, I'd say about 1 mile an hour.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it just shot back the opposite direction, the same way it came, but like sort of
So which direction did it come from?
The east.
So from the
The field.
So from the sea, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. And then it shot back towards the sea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you managed to pin down a date yet?
The date, I have no idea.
But you know, you said it was September, yeah?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was September, because that's the month that I had that black FTO.
Right.
That's the only way I can really pinpoint it.
But you think, was it a school day, because you'd pick your kids up, or not?
It was definitely 100% a school day.
Okay.
It was only 20 feet above the road, and it was bigger than the road and the tree. It was massive. I can't put it into scale. So if it's next to a car, if it was like next to a car, it would be the size of 10 double-decker buses.
Right.
That big.
So it was 3 times the width of the road, you said?
Yeah, I'd say, yeah. It was like the only thing you could see when you looked up. You couldn't see the sky around it.
Okay.
And that was freaky, because the way it shot back, it was instant, and my girl was crying her eyes out. And my boy was, oh my God, what was that? What was that?
And so no noise at all?
Pardon?
No noise at all?
Absolutely no noise. The only thing that was weird, the only thing that was weird, I could taste. It was like, I could taste, that sounds stupid, I sound like an idiot. I could taste electric. You know, like,
yeah.
You know when you put an old PP3 battery on your tongue?
Yeah.
Taste that.
And you said you could smell like a transformer type smell.
So, if he's correct in what he says, that he could smell ozone, which is can be generated when you have electric discharge. We'll go back to the sighting over the wind turbines. The guy said it had tentacles coming down to the ground. That could have been electric discharge, which maybe was not visible during the day, perhaps. Because if something is electrically charged, as it comes nearer to the ground, the nearer it gets, the more likely you'll get a discharge. Okay, now, yeah, there were, after that point in time, so we're talking September 2011 for that sighting of the guy that witnessed the craft that we've just seen, which is the same month that the sheep went missing, but we'll come on to that in a second. But further UFOs, again in the Louth Leader, a couple of months after that. Now let's just plot the activity on the map then that I've gone through. Got the wind turbine incident. It's about a 15-mile square. The wind turbine incident, many sightings above Mablethorpe and Trusthorpe, and quite a lot over Louth. This was the egg-shaped object that this guy witnessed in his car. We've got Eric Goring witnessing triangles here and also on this road. So I'm just going to show you where these 1,500 sheep disappeared from on this map. Right there. Single field, 1,500 sheep disappeared. And I'll explain what this structure is a little bit later. So the point to make is the zone where those sheep disappeared from is on the edge of this area which has been dubbed the Lincolnshire Triangle by the local newspaper. So I'm going to play now, this was the detective who turned up the morning after the sheep had disappeared, speaking on local radio.
Obviously, once you walk into a field, you can see that there are quite a few sheep missing, but until you actually do your tally, you're not sure exactly how many have gone, and that's gone up considerably now to 597 ewes and 901 lambs.
And what's the herdsman told you about how somebody could do this? How they could come along? Because you've got to know what you're doing to take 1,500 sheep.
Certainly. I mean, this is an organised group that have come along, ready kitted with the necessary transport. We suspect to be extremely large loaders, cattle wagons, probably the sort that are 3 tiers high. He says to load on 1,500 sheep, if you knew what you were doing and you were going to pen them properly within the lorries, it would take you about an hour per lorry. However, if you were going to do it without any care in the world, as we suspect that these people have done, you could load them without their pens, squash them all in together, and you could do probably a quarter of an hour per lorry. So probably about half an hour in total it's taken to do this.
And of course the question is where they've gone, and I know one line of inquiry is looking at whether they could have gone through an abattoir, and I suppose it would have had to be an unlicensed abattoir if they have done, because everything is very strictly regulated these days, isn't it?
Certainly. It would be very difficult to take any cattle through any marketplace because they're, as you say, extremely regulated, and any marketplace would know, they know their farmers, they come on a regular basis, and they know that they bring so many sheep and they know how many sheep they've got. or how many cattle they've got. But to take this amount of sheep, you would be noticed straight away at market. So the only other option really is that these sheep have been taken probably for slaughter somewhere. And again, as you say, it's very well regulated. Our country is probably one of the better ones at regulating the slaughter of meat. And these animals have been herded off somewhere and will be certainly not treated as well as they would be if they were done through the proper channels. I would urge any member of the public that gets offered any meat from the back of a van or anywhere else that doesn't seem to be proper and not a proper butcher's, not to purchase those items, because that's probably where they will go onto the market somewhere.
Okay, now the detective was quite economic with the truth in that interview, as will become clear later in the presentation, and he mentions illegal abattoirs. No one's ever found one. Now, the trucks he mentioned, the biggest ones I think they use in Britain, hold around 500 sheep, so you would need at least 3, probably 4 of vehicles such as this one. Okay. Now, about a month after this event happened, 3 people were arrested for rustling these sheep. So when I saw that article, I thought, oh well, maybe the sheep have been stolen, maybe that's the answer, okay? 2 men and a woman have been arrested after the theft of almost 1,500 sheep in Lincolnshire. So I just left it there, I didn't bother looking at it. But over time I became a bit curious. I thought, well, they've never said whether they were charged or whether they were convicted, just arrested. So I decided after several months to go and investigate this. Now this is the church that I interviewed Eric Goring in at Brink Hill, and when I was driving through there I stopped and I asked this guy walking his dog, which is not far from the field, do you know anything about these missing 1,500 sheep? He says, oh yeah. He said the landowner, who was also the animal owner, he says the shepherd's responsible. I said, well, what does the shepherd say? He says, oh, the shepherd says he's definitely not responsible. Okay, so they were both kind of blaming each other. So this is where the location of the field, which is in a very remote location, about a mile from a little village called Donington. And there's an interesting feature a mile south of the field, a mile due south. It's on this corner, and it's a tower run by the RAF. It's not a transmitter tower. It's actually like a climbing frame that the RAF climb up and down. Hang on, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to the tower. This is the village of Donington, which I say is in quite a remote part of Lincolnshire. Just a shop, a pub and a post office and a few houses. So I went into the shop, and has anyone seen the League of Gentlemen? You've got the picture, right? So I asked the woman, I said to her, you know, I'm investigating these missing sheep. She didn't even speak. She just sort of shook her head and walked slowly backwards like this. So I just walked outside the shop and just started taking loads of pictures of the shop to annoy her. So I went in the pub and I spoke to them. The woman in the pub said, oh, I don't think those sheep ever existed. Which is a fair enough point, that's possible, okay? Went in the post office, I got a bit more information from that guy. He told me that the person who'd been arrested was actually the shepherd, the shepherd's wife, and the shepherd's father. The shepherd's father is also a shepherd. So they've chosen the people who are closest to the sheep in terms of looking after them, because they've had no other explanation for it. Okay, now as I mentioned, let me see what we've got here. Yeah, this is the field. So the field is an oblong shaped field. It's about 450 yards by 220 yards. This is an electric fence running down one side. So the field is contained in this section here. There's a deep gorge going down the bottom here with a fence running along there. So on one side you've got an electric fence leading to another field. You've got a fence along here and a fence going to another field and a fence along the bottom going to another field. So there's only one road runs alongside it. This is viewed from the other side, so the field in question comes down here. That's the area there. Okay, now aerial, yeah, that's just a picture of the electric fence. So an aerial view, as I said, you've got a very narrow road coming down here. You've got one gate there. You've got electric fence coming across here leading out into another field. You've got a fence along here. This here is not a gate, it's actually a portion of the fence which can be removed. So they can move animals through that gap there. Again, fields here, this isn't a road, it's just a hedgerow. So there's no access there and there's no access at the bottom of the field. this is actually quite a large hedgerow here and also a large hedgerow there. So the only place where they could have been rustled from is through that gate, okay, leading out onto the road. Okay, that again, that's another picture of the electric fence. All right, yeah. As I mentioned, a mile south of the field is a structure here which is a large climbing frame, and it's got the RAF climb up and down it, and a local woman told me that these viewing platforms here, they're actually quite large, hundreds of feet in the air. The RAF camp out on there for whatever reason, and it's a mile south of the field where the sheep went missing, and it overlooks the entire Lincolnshire Triangle because it's actually built on the top of a hill as well. So you'll be able to see for miles from those platforms. Next to the platforms are some rather rusty large satellite dishes. I don't know what they're for. Okay, more pictures of the field. And you can just see the tower, the RAF tower there. This is the field where the sheep were, that's the tower. All right, now, there's only one house within miles of the field, and that house is on this corner here, about 80 yards from the bottom corner of the field. So if sheep had been rustled through that gate, there's a chance that this couple who lived there would have heard it. They had a dog which barked throughout the whole time that I was interviewing them. So I managed to interview this couple who were interviewed by the police, and this is what they had to say. That's their house there. Okay. This is Patrick and Gabriella, and just standing in front of their house here. And if I just come out of the house, the field starts just on that corner because there's a fence going across from there. Right. So as you've gone around that corner to the left is where, at that point.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Now, on that particular night when these sheep disappeared, did you hear anything?
No, we didn't hear a thing, did we?
No.
And I can hear the dog barking there now.
Yes.
So.
I'm a fairly heavy sleeper. My wife can be light sleeping, but neither of us heard anything.
Okay.
My dog would have heard something, I would have thought, if they'd been in the proximity of the house.
Now there are rumours that the shepherd and his wife were implicated, and that they were arrested, perhaps for taking money from the people who turned up with these wagons.
Yes, that's what we'd heard.
That's what you'd heard.
He took a backhander because he was involved.
Now this is rumour, isn't it? You were telling me that you've not heard this, because I haven't seen that in the newspapers.
No.
You said you think he might be inside now.
Well, that's what I'd heard, but you know what people are like, he's locked up now and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
All I can assume was it was done in the early hours of the morning, in the dark, and how they did it without being seen or heard.
Because that's the other question. They would have had to have sheepdogs, 1,500 sheep, rounding them up. They just give the sheepdogs night vision goggles, perhaps.
Well, I don't know. I don't know whether they use any dogs or what.
Well, I would have thought they'd have to.
Well, I would have thought so.
Unless it was just a gang of men running around the field. But I mean, the sheep were definitely in there about sort of 5 or 6 o'clock the night before, because I remember driving home and seeing
them. Right, so you're a witness to them being there at 6 o'clock.
They were there about tea time the night before.
Great.
Yes, and then not the next morning.
So, I mean, you're talking seeing a lot of sheep the night before.
Yes.
Because it's a huge amount of sheep. And then
it's a very big field.
So you're a first-hand witness to that following day, there was no sheep in the field.
That's right. Yeah.
So you were actually visited by Special Branch?
Yeah, Special Branch came to ask us if we'd heard anything. Because, you know, they reckoned there would have been quite a bit of noise. They reckoned they'd need at least 2 wagons and the noise of the sheep. I mean, you know, they're not quiet, are they?
No, they make a lot of noise.
And we had to say that we hadn't heard a thing.
I live in Lincolnshire. Special Branch don't come when animals are stolen.
Yes.
Well, tyre tracks.
Well, I'll come on to that. But yes, it's a fairly large crime because apparently it's about £100,000 worth of livestock. So the next part of the investigation, I needed to find and meet the person who was arrested. All I had to go on, because the people in the village wouldn't tell me their names, was that one of them lived in Nettleton. All right, so I drove to Nettleton thinking it was a tiny little village. and that he'd be easy to find. It was a big village. So I thought, oh, how am I going to find this guy? All I know is he lives in Nettleton. So I headed for the local intelligence gathering establishment. Which pubs are excellent sources of intelligence, believe me. I went in, you're not going to believe this. Yeah. I went in, you won't believe this, there was one guy at the bar, so I bought a pint of lager, I struck up a conversation, and I said, do you know anything about these sheep? And this is God's honest truth. He said, oh, that'll be Arthur, he lives just down there. I thought, there is a God. Okay, so I knocked on his door, the guy came to the door, so he's the father of the shepherd who was arrested, and a couple of weeks previous to me knocking on his door, and this was in June this year, he'd been completely cleared by the police. Now, he didn't want to be interviewed. He'd gone through a lot of stress, been under suspicion for this crime for several months, and eventually being cleared because there was no evidence against the guy. He has no previous, and you can judge a person, and I would say definitely this guy was not involved. And I recorded my thoughts immediately after I spoke to him in the car.
Right, I've just knocked on the door of the man who was arrested for the sheep rustling, and he's informed me he seemed a very honest, genuine guy. He's got no previous history or anything like that. That 3 weeks ago the police cleared him completely of having anything to do with any sheep rustling, and also the other 2 people who were also arrested have been completely cleared, right? And that has not been put in the media. Apparently the landowner basically give the police a tip off. He thought that these people were involved, but it turns out that they weren't involved. So there is no explanation as to who has rustled these sheep. Now, this guy is an experienced shepherd. He reckons you would need 5 wagons, each of them 3-tiered. He said you would need 2 or 3 dogs. And the other thing that he said was, if you were going to do something like that, every person along the chain would have to be in on the crime. In other words, the driver, the people rounding up the sheep, the people at the abattoir, any checks that the vehicle would have to go through, etc. The landowner. He said everyone would have to be on it. He said there's no way you could carry this off without basically the police finding out or being exposed. So it's the disappearance of these 1,500 sheep has clearly caused a rift between the landowner and the people who were looking after the sheep, and there's no resolution of this. So the sheep have not turned up, no one has been found guilty of anything. So the BBC and other mainstream news outlets were quite happy to report, oh, 3 people have been arrested, but they were not happy to report that 3 people were not charged and 3 people have now been completely cleared. And this guy is asking his solicitor if he will ask the police and the media to report that he has been cleared, and he's not sure that they're going to do that. He had clearly had a rough time with this. That was obvious from speaking to him, but he didn't want to be interviewed for obvious reasons, and he stated that the other people who have been implicated also probably would not want to be interviewed. They just want to put this behind them. Really, the UFO explanation is still well and truly possible, in my opinion.
After we found that out, we camped out in a campsite, and we chose one bang in the middle of the Lincolnshire Triangle. And you can see there we were the only tent this was in the middle of summer. So didn't say anything though. Okay, so what I did when I spoke to the guy who'd been arrested, he wouldn't go on camera. I says, look, I'm just trying to report the truth. If you change your mind, there's my number. Give us a ring, I'll come down and interview you, because it would be great to get you on camera because you're obviously not involved. So what he did was he gave my number to the detective who'd been investigating it and said, there's this really weird guy been to my door. So I'm driving back from Lincolnshire to Newcastle, and the detective rings me up and says, what are you talking to, well, he was called Arthur, I'll not give you a second name. What are you talking to him for? And I said, well, I'm interested in the case. And the detective couldn't understand how I'd found him and why I was interviewing him. I said, well, you do know it's Britain's largest ever rustling incident, don't you? He said, I'm well aware of that. And then I said to this detective, I says, oh, because I've got my own theories on it. And get this, he said to me, "Really? I'd be really interested in your theories." And I thought to myself, what do I say now? I said, "Did you know that your local newspaper calls the region of Louth the Lincolnshire Triangle?" "No." "Did you know that 1,500 sheep disappeared without a trace from Nottinghamshire 11 years ago?" "No." "Would you like some information on it?" Anyway, so I give him my website, and then as I was on the phone to him, he says, "Oh, I've got your website." And I think he went home that day with a completely different view of reality.